There is no fantasy here, only a ship that has been collapsing in darkness for more than a century. The first sight.
Even before entering, the damage reads like violence frozen in steel. Every ripped edge suggests
Inside, the wreck no longer feels like a ship. It feels like a building struck, abandoned, drowned. The first human evidence appears exactly where you would dread finding it. Not displayed, not preserved, just caught in collapse. A suit, a bed, a blocked doorway, and this looks less like a burial and more like a last failed attempt to shelter in place.
The debris tells the emotional truth. Nobody left this room in order. Everything in here stopped mid-life. What shocks most is not the bones alone. It is the ordinary domestic layout around them, the proof that horror happened in a lived-in space. One cabin can be explained away as chance. A whole corridor of crushed rooms suggests a chain of desperate human moments.
This is the first anchor of memory, entry/return. Without a marker like this, the Titanic can turn a route into a maze within seconds.
This is how tragedy hardens. Not in headlines, but in unfinished letters, abandoned routines, and rooms that never reset.
A wreck of this size demands landmarks. This is the first true junction, and the
This stairwell void is a map point and a warning. It tells you where you are, and it reminds you how the route is consistent. Marker behind, stairwell to the rear, forward line ahead. That order matters when fear begins to blur memory.
Luxury survives here only as wreckage. Wealth changes the furniture, not the ending.
The objects are elegant, but the arrangement is not. Everything here has the posture of panic.
This second skeleton changes the mood completely. The room is no longer just destroyed, it is inhabited by the evidence of final choices.
Even a harmless movement becomes a shock in a room like this. The mind is already primed for danger the moment human remains appear.
This is the kind of mistake that turns a familiar corridor into a trap. One careless contact, and the ship erases itself.
The correct response is not speed, it is control. In a silt-out, panic is the faster route to getting lost.
When the wreck vanishes, the line becomes the world. Nothing else deserves trust until the water clears.
There it is, the same entry tag, route confirmed. In a wreck like this, recognition itself feels like rescue.
The ship changes character here. Comfort gives way to function, and that often means we are getting closer to the places where the crew kept things moving.
The wreck is not empty, it is occupied now, and even a small creature can make the body react as if the ship itself is pushing back.
This room once handled movement, names, destinations, ordinary communication. There is a different kind of sadness in workrooms. They preserve urgency because the people inside were probably doing.
This skeleton is positioned like someone still working, still reaching. That is what makes it unbearable.
There is no cinematic pose here, only impact, obstruction, and a room that came apart around a human being.
This is not loot. It is administration, obligation, routine, the kinds of things people were still.
The surprises are small, but the body interprets them as threat, because the room already feels wrong in every possible way.
The audio is dominated by the sounds of deep-sea diving, a continuous low-frequency suit hum and the steady rhythm.
Same junction.
Good.
This is the kind of repetition that keeps a wreck from swallowing your sense of direction.
Right junction, correct line, controlled pace. Curiosity has to stay subordinate to route discipline.
Doors matter in wrecks. A door that stayed shut for years can hide a room that preserved its last moment more completely than the corridors.
Washrooms are unsettling because they preserve privacy. The wreck turns that privacy into evidence.
This skeleton was not found in a grand space. It was found in a corner, a human decision to shrink, hide, and hope. These details are quieter than a skeleton, but together they tell the same story. Ordinary life interrupted with no chance to return. This is the second escalation. Not blindness now, but confinement. A warped frame can grab a diver as effectively as a hand.
This is how entrapment begins. Not with collapse, but with one stubborn inch of metal refusing to let go.
Do not wrestle the wreck. Back off, re-angle, keep the line, and solve the geometry before fear solves it for you.
Clear through. The wreck did not win that exchange, but it made the point. Every opening has to be earned.
Where passengers experienced luxury, rooms like this absorbed labor. The wreck preserves both, but the labor spaces often feel more immediate.
Meals once organized this space down to the minute. Now the tools remain, but the schedule ended in an instant. The sea has not erased the room. It has merely redistributed it, and that redistribution feels eerily close to panic.
Provision rooms can be more haunting than luxury suites. They speak of maintenance, survival, and the daily machinery of life that could not save the ship. Again, it is not the fish itself. It is the timing, the darkness, and the body's refusal to forget that corners can conceal anything.
The strongest choice in a wreck is often restraint. Not every dark cavity deserves entry just because it exists.
Same stairwell void. Good. Landmarks like this are the difference between exploration and drifting into confusion.
Crew spaces compress the tragedy. Here the distances were shorter, the rooms smaller, and the choices even fewer.
This skeleton tells a different social story, but the same ending. Class changed the uniform, not the fear.
The quieter the possessions, the louder the loss. A cup, a pipe, a bunk.
There is the stairwell again. Same landmark, same geometry, same line. Exactly what you want before entering another blind section.
This crack matters. It is a route marker and a warning, because current here can turn particles into instant disorientation. This is the sort of place that feels manageable until the water changes its mind.
This crack sits near the return route. Remember that. In bad visibility, memory has to be built before the problem starts.
This is different from the earlier silt out. This is current-born whiteout. Visibility stolen not by contact, but by the wreck breathing through a crack.
Only the line. Only the tag. That is enough. In moments like this, survival is just the ability to accept reduced information.
Recovery comes in layers. First the tag, then the line, then the walls. Orientation returns piece by piece.
Same crack, same return tag, route restored. That confirmation is what keeps a scare from becoming an emergency.
Utility spaces like this are the skeleton of a ship's daily life. They remind you that Titanic was not only a...
There is something heartbreaking about precision tools in a failed machine. Order existed here, right up until chaos overran it.
Another reminder. This wreck is shared territory now. The instinct to grab has to yield to the discipline to leave.
A desk in a wreck is always compelling. It promises names, authority, records, and sometimes...
Rooms like this create a terrible illusion that someone should still be here, straightening the papers and setting the chair upright.
Authority survives here only as fragments, a seal, a purse, and a locked drawer that could not lock out disaster.
The wreck is still moving in slow, almost patient ways. Every sound asks the same question.
This is the pattern now. Room, work, interruption, remains. The ship keeps repeating the same terrible sentence.
A desk, a locked drawer, a frock coat, and a skeleton behind the furniture. This looks like a room where duty outlasted safety by a fatal margin. This may be the clearest emotional tableau so far. Workstation, records, and a body that never made it beyond the room. Time has stripped away identity, but not context. The room still remembers enough for the mind to reconstruct the person. The deeper the shock, the more important the line becomes. Emotion cannot be allowed to displace navigation.
Correct junction, correct label. This is how a safe exit stays possible, even while the wreck keeps offering reasons to go farther. Same junction, deeper mystery. Some rooms advertise themselves even in ruin, and this one looks... This kind of threshold is irresistible because it withholds just enough. The room looks untouched by people for a century.
Another skeleton. Another room that looks like terror-interrupted wealth. And this time, something locked remains beside the dead.
This room is not arranged by decay alone. It looks like a person tried to hold position here while the ship was breaking order into chaos.
Every clue in here says the same thing. Comfort existed, then failed completely. Wealth did not preserve calm.
This is not treasure in the adventure sense. It is social life interrupted. Identity, memory, status.
In a room already carrying human evidence, even a small fish feels like a threat, because the mind is waiting for the next shock.
This marker matters. Bridge loop means this room is no longer just a discovery site. It is part of a survivable path back. The architecture changes again here. The ship starts to feel less social and more controlled, as if authority once lived just ahead.
Correct junction, clear labels. In a wreck this complicated, a readable split feels almost luxurious.
A room like this rewards patience. Force ruins context, but careful entry can preserve the last readable arrangement.
This is where routes were once corrected, bearings checked, decisions made. Down here,
An officer's coat in the chart room carries its own kind of gravity. It implies responsibility endured right up to physical impossibility.
These are instruments made to reduce uncertainty, yet they ended their service inside a ship the sea refused to spare. The outside is suddenly visible here, and that matters. It reminds you the wreck is not a building. It is a Command centers are haunting in a different way. They show where decisions once concentrated, even after the devices themselves have mostly gone. Signal gear surviving here is deeply unsettling. It suggests that the ship was built to communicate clearly and still went under into absolute silence. Correct marker, correct loop. This is exactly the kind of confirmation that keeps curiosity from overrunning judgment.
the ship feels constricted here, as if authority once occupied a surprisingly fragile set of rooms.
This space is more personal than the chart room. It suggests command not just as function, but as residence.
A desk drawer can be more haunting than a safe. It preserves the confidence of normal life, the expectation that tomorrow still exists. This is another human instinct preserved in wreck geometry. Move behind something solid. Make yourself small.
Objects of authority survive here in fragments, and that fragmentation says more than pristine relics ever could.
The correct reaction is the recovery, not the flinch. Blind openings invite exactly the kind of impulsive mistake a wreck punishes.
The route is shifting from command presence to technical function. That usually means smaller rooms and denser evidence. Technical rooms can be emotionally brutal because they preserve concentration. You can almost feel the urgency they once carried. The scale of this room is intimate, and that intimacy makes the silence more severe. This is one of the clearest work-to-death tableaux yet. Desk, chair, equipment, and a body still oriented toward task. This is how history becomes devastating. One tie-in box. After a room like that, the smartest move is not deeper curiosity. It is a controlled return to known geometry.
There is the stairwell again. Correct landmark, correct route, no confusion. This is exactly where you want certainty to return.
The route now leaves control spaces and returns to passenger life, which usually means richer objects and more intimate traces.
Public rooms carry the emotional weight of interrupted normality. They were made for comfort, not for the final moments we find preserved in them.
Spaces designed for leisure often become the most painful to witness, because they preserve how ordinary.
The room's elegance makes the discovery harsher, not softer. It turns a social setting into a frozen site of fear. Small personal tools do what grand relics cannot. They restore the person-sized scale of loss.
The wreck keeps producing these tiny shocks, and each one raises the body's alert level another notch. The route stays logical. Landmark behind, corridor ahead, line centered. That discipline is what...
Correct junction again. Every confirmed split lowers the chance that the wreck can turn familiarity into disorientation.
Service rooms are full of interrupted intention, things prepared for use that never reached the people they were meant for. The emotional force here comes from incompletion. Nothing in this room looks concluded. It all looks interrupted.
A dinner jacket in a service corridor suggests confusion at the end. passenger and staff spaces collapsing into one another under pressure and fear.
The wreck does not need to be dramatic to feel hostile. Sometimes all it takes is one blind reach and one defensive creature. A return label is not a formality down here. It is a promise that the wreck still has a readable way back.
Kyle changes the emotional temperature of the wreck. It makes the room feel colder, more clinical, and somehow more exposed. A partially preserved room can be more frightening than a destroyed one, because it holds the illusion that its last moment is still waiting.
This room has a different kind of horror. Its structure survived well enough to preserve how abruptly human presence vanished from it.
The skeleton belongs to the infrastructure of comfort, the staff presence hidden behind luxury until disaster made every role equally vulnerable. Bath items carry no grandeur at all, and that is exactly why they hurt. They belong to routine, privacy, and the expectation of ordinary time.
The bathroom keeps flipping between elegance and intrusion. It is both preserved and colonized.
This crack is another memory point. Current source here, return line here. In poor visibility, that relationship matters more than the room name.
Pyramids. A pool room underwater is almost unbearable in its irony. The ship carried water as luxury.
The smartest choice here is restraint. Legibility does not equal safety, and preserved rooms can still conceal weak structure. This ship keeps changing character room by room, and that variation is what makes its human history feel so broad and so intimate at once.
Rooms dedicated to health feel especially cruel in a wreck, because they advertise preparation for life in a place filled with death.
Even here, the artifacts are humble and specific. That specificity is what keeps the wreck grounded in reality rather than myth. The body keeps reading sudden motion as danger, because the wreck never stops layering surprise onto confinement.
The pattern holds. Explore, confirm, return to landmark, then choose the next branch with intention.
Stairwell confirmed again. This is the kind of repeated certainty that allows the rest of the wreck to stay psychologically manageable. The smaller the room, the more complete its last arrangement can be. That makes staff corridors deceptively rich ground.
A trunk like this feels less accidental than scattered debris. It suggests someone packed, stored, and expected retrieval that never came.
The ship keeps proving the same point from different social angles. Duty, status, clothing, room type, none of it changed the final vulnerability.
This is not yet a full retreat signal, but it is a clear warning. The wreck is still adjusting, and every adjustment has consequences.
Correct return markers. Good. After a ceiling groan, confirmation is not comfort, it is necessity.
Open water beside the root can help with orientation, but it also reminds you how thin the wreckle's boundaries really are.
This crack sits near the exterior tear in the return line. That relationship will matter if visibility suddenly degrades again.
Service alcoves complete the emotional map of the ship. Behind every elegant room was a cramped system of work and storage. This is one of the most human poses in the wreck. Caught at a threshold, not settled into a corner, but still trying to move. Sometimes one small tool near a hand says more than a room full of luxury objects.
The wreck belongs to the sea now in ways history sometimes forget. Human tragedy and marine occupation exist here in the same frame.
Returning to a major landmark after a dense cluster of finds is good practice. It stops the wreck from turning detail into confusion.
Stairwell confirmed. Junction confirmed. This is exactly the kind of double check that keeps the next decision rational.
Heavy doors always change the mood. They imply records, valuables, accountability, and perhaps the final attempt to protect them.
Rooms built for control often preserve the most emotionally charged stillness, because they were meant to resist disorder and failed anyway. This room still feels administrative, even in ruin. It holds the shape of order more stubbornly than the spaces around it.
This is one of the strongest duty-bound scenes in the wreck so far. A secure room, a safe cabinet, and a body that did not leave its station. This is a serious warning now, even if it is not yet the final one. The wreck is reminding us that every extra minute has a price. Marker confirmed. Route confirmed. The wreck has given us another reason to respect the timing of every decision from here onward. The route is still readable, and that matters more now than any new discovery.
This far inside the wreck, the ship narrows back into function here. Rooms like these handle details, names, schedules, and the ordinary administration of thousands of lives.
Correct junction, clear route, no guesswork. In a wreck this unstable, certainty is built from small, repeated confirmations.
This is the kind of room where strangers became passengers on paper. It held names, bookings, instructions, and the illusion of orderly travel. Offices like this turn disaster into something painfully administrative. They show how catastrophe breaks systems one practical room at a time.
These are tools of assignment and order. Keys, stamps, records. They matter because they reduce the ship from legend back.
This skeleton belongs to paperwork, keys, and direct human contact. It turns an office into a final station.
Tickets are among the saddest things in a wreck. They represent intention, the belief that a destination would be reached.
A controlled exit from a room like that is part of the work. Discovery means very little if the route back stops making sense.
The stairwell void is the ship's internal compass now. Every time it appears, the route becomes legible again. A barber shop inside a wreck feels disturbingly personal. It preserves grooming, routine.
Rooms of self-presentation become devastating in a wreck. They confront you with how recently people expected to keep living normal, visible lives.
A barber's tools are almost painfully human. They belong to touch, conversation, vanity, and the expectation of another morning.
This skeleton is impossible to romanticize. It is simply a human body caught in a room built for ordinary service. The wreck does not need large threats to trigger self-protection. In close quarters, sudden motion is enough. A barbershop without reflections is one of the wreck's quietest horrors. It preserves the shape of self-recognition after everyone is gone.
A return marker at this stage is not optional. It turns a chain of discoveries into a route that can still be unwound.
Public rooms expand the wreck psychologically. They remind you how much of Titanic was built for conversation, display, and civilized routine.
Smoking rooms are intimate in a different way. They were built for pause, conversation, and confidence.
A smoking room artifact does more than label a space. It restores the habits and social rituals that disaster shattered.
A card table should suggest leisure. Here it has become cover, obstruction, and a witness to the last seconds of human fear.
This sound carries weight. It is no longer a room settling quietly. It is the structure asking how much more intrusion it will tolerate.
This is the correct moment to reduce ambition. The wreck has started to answer back, and that changes the rules.
This crack is close to the way out. In a retreat, landmarks like this are not scenery.
Correct marker, correct branch. This is the kind of ordinary confirmation that keeps a withdrawal from becoming a scramble.
Rooms built for leisure and sunlight become especially painful here, because every airy detail has been translated. This room preserves sociability in fragments, cards, tea service, decorative objects.
This skeleton shows how quickly elegant surroundings become improvised cover when a ship stops being a ship and becomes a failing structure.
This is the point where curiosity ends. The wreck is no longer just unstable in theory, it is actively signaling that the margin is closing.
The decision is made here. No deeper penetration, no more artifact handling, no second look at the hidden.
A good retreat from a wreck is quiet and exact. Panic wastes vision, wastes motion, and can damage. Exit T is not just a label here. It is a boundary between finishing the investigation and preserving the wreck, the route, and the diver.
Correct marker, correct direction, no uncertainty. A retreat only stays safe when every next turn is chosen before it is needed. The stairwell is exactly where it should be. In a withdrawal, familiar geometry can calm the mind as effectively as any tool.
Correct junction, no shortcuts. In a weakening wreck, the safest corridor is almost always the one already understood.
This is exactly how bad decisions begin. An apparent shortcut, a blind opening, and an excuse to improvise. On the way out, familiar wreckage becomes navigation rather than spectacle. The ship is no longer something to...
A disciplined retreat means resisting the urge to look back into rooms that already gave what they could safely give.
Correct marker. correct corridor. This kind of ordinary confirmation is what prevents stress from turning into error.
The ship is still talking, and its message has become simpler. Leave while the route is intact. Material changes can guide memory as effectively as markers. Tile means the route is exactly where it should be.
This crack sits exactly where expected, and that is enough. During retreat, certainty matters more than inspection.
The stairwell remains the strongest proof that the route home still exists. It turns the ship's damage into a usable map.
This is the sound that answers the question of whether leaving early was necessary. It was.
Correct loop marker. The route is still intact, and that single fact is now more valuable than any unopened drawer or unseen room. Window geometry, line position, corridor angle, these details now replace exploration. They are enough to get out cleanly.
The outside water helps orient the retreat, but it also reminds you how little separates the wreck's interior from total exposure.
This crack is near the way out, just as expected. In retreat, recognition is a form of safety. The ship is answering our presence with movement now. That does not mean we caused it, but it does mean we cannot pretend the timing is unlimited.
There is the entry marker. At this point, the wreck is no longer a maze. It is a known path back to open water.
The first corridor is the right corridor. When you are leaving a wreck, familiarity is worth more than novelty.
The first skeleton remains exactly where it was found, and that constancy matters. We came deeper. The opening looks harsher on the way out than on the way in, because it now represents timing, restraint, and the end of penetration. Outside the hull, the wreck stops feeling like rooms and becomes a wounded shell again. That perspective changes everything.
Once you are outside, Titanic becomes enormous again. The human rooms. Leaving the hull cleanly is part of leaving the wreck responsibly. Even outside, the ship deserves distance.
Outside the wreck, the sea has its own hierarchy. The correct response to a large predator is distance, not fascination.
Self-protection here means not escalating curiosity. The wreck offers enough danger without pursuing the sea life that now lives around it.
From outside, the rooms collapse back into one overwhelming fact. This ship is enormous, broken, and
inside were desks, basins, chairs, letters, tickets, and skeletons. Outside, all of that is absorbed into one.
Even the debris field deserves restraint. Nothing here is separate from the wreck's history or from the people whose last environment it became.
That opening was a route through human history, but it is still only a wound in a wreck.
Titanic's scale is the final correction to every intimate room inside it. Each skeleton belonged to illusions.
The farther you move from the hull, the more the discoveries condense into meaning rather than detail.
What this exploration confirms is not a mystery solved, but a pattern made undeniable. The ship's last spaces.
The evidence inside confirms that final decisions happened in offices, service rooms, lounges,
What remains unresolved is equally important. Sealed rooms, deeper collapses, inaccessible recesses, and storage.
Leaving now is necessary for 3 reasons at once: structural safety, preservation of an undisturbed site.
A wreck this famous can still surprise by how ordinary its pain looks up close. Desk drawers, bath.
Even outside, the wreck speaks in layers. The giant structure above, the human scale fragments below.
What was proven is enough to change the wreck from abstract tragedy to inhabited reality. What remains hidden? We leave now not because the ship has nothing left to reveal, but because revelation is never worth carelessness in a place of the dead.
Essex. The final discipline of this dive is departure. No last-minute return, no one more room, no gesture.
A last look is enough. The ship remains what it has become, a deteriorating wreck, a historical wreck.
We proved enough, left enough unknown, and departed at the right moment. That is the only honest way to leave Titanic.